One really common cause of vocal strain as singers move higher in pitch, as well as of vocal registration problems, including breaks and cracks and abrupt flips, is an inability, and in some cases an unwillingness, to allow the vocal folds to gradually thin as we move higher in pitch. And some of us who sing exclusively in contemporary commercial styles of music, CCM, have been almost programmed to believe that head voice has no place in the music that we sing. And while it's true that we will not use our head voice, or M2, as extensively as a singer of classical styles, including opera, it's a myth to believe that we don't need head voice at all, that we don't need to train it, and that successful singers in contemporary styles sing exclusively in chest voice, or M1. And when we believe myths like this, that has a direct impact on our training approach, which can in turn impede or even stall our progress as singers. So all singers, regardless of vocal style or genre, need to develop the entirety of their vocal ranges. That is, they need to train both the lower mechanism and the higher mechanism. And when we cross-train like that, that actually helps us to find balance throughout the entire range. So today I'm going to give you 3 exercises that you can use to get started. 3 exercises that are going to help you access and start to develop that upper register, that M2, that head voice. Now please do not expect that the sounds that you'll be making will be full and beautiful and professionally viable immediately. If you have not already been working on actively developing this part of your range, it is likely going to be weak and underdeveloped. But don't let that deter you. If you continue to neglect that part of your range, it will remain weak and underdeveloped and completely unusable in a performance situation. So you're going to have to be patient with yourself. You're going to have to do a lot of work, and it's going to take time. And at first, you're not necessarily going to like the sounds that you're making, but that's all part of the process. The first 2 exercises that I'm going to share with you today use semi-occluded phonations. Semi-occluded phonations are sounds that we make with a partial, semi, closure, occlusion here at the level of the articulators. And that partial closure, that semi-occlusion, somewhat impedes the exiting airflow, but the benefit of this semi-occlusion is that it creates a positive back pressure within the supraglottal spaces, within the parts of the vocal tract that lie above the vocal folds. And this helps the vocal tract to open up, to release, and it helps the vocal folds to operate very efficiently. And for those who sing with a lot of pressure and force and pressing here at the glottal level, this can actually help them to find more of a release and release some of that pressing. So when I'm talking about excess vocal weight, I'm talking about there being too much vocal fold mass involved in the voice production on that pitch and for that register. Now understand that I do not necessarily equate that with carrying M1 or chest voice function up higher in the scale. Those two are not necessarily synonymous. There are some singers out there who do an amazing job of being able to carry that M1 function, that chest voice function, up really high in the scale without also dragging up excess vocal weight. It is entirely possible. But when they do this, they're allowing the vocal folds to gradually thin as they move higher. And they've probably done this by training head voice function. That gives them that balance. So when we're dragging up excess vocal weight, too thick a vocal fold mass for the pitch and register, we're essentially weighing down the instrument so that it's unable to make flexible adjustments for pitch and register. And so I would liken that kind of to walking around in hip waders. I don't know if you've ever worn hip waders before, but my father used to fish when I was younger, and I remember trying on his hip waders. They were way too big on me, but those things were heavy. Or, if you have ties to the mafia, you can liken this to going for a swim in the bay while sporting shoes constructed of concrete. And your body is trying to swim up to the surface, and you want to get there, you want to go up, but you're being weighed down. Literally. So today's first exercise uses lip rolls. A little hard to do with lipstick on. If you have difficulties making this sound or keeping that vibration going, feel free to just take your fingers and gently lift up on your cheeks. And that will lift some of the weight off the lips. Or you can use tongue tip trills. Right? I'm going to be using tongue tip trills today because of the lipstick. All right, so if you can't make either of these sounds, don't fret about it. It's fine. It's not critical that you make these sounds in your training. You can just skip ahead to the next two exercises. So we're going to start by singing a 5-note descending pattern, and we're going to place the top note of that pattern just slightly above our break. And that's going to help ensure that we're accessing that thinner edge function of the vocal folds. And lip and tongue tip trills are great for helping us with this. So we're first going to do a descending pattern on a lip roll or tongue tip trill. Tongue. And then when we get up to that very top note again, we're going to switch to a vowel sound. I like ah or o. You can sing any vowel sound, but ahs and ohs tend to be the easiest. Up the scale like this and then back down. And with this exercise, we want to make sure that when we're switching from the lip or tongue tip trill to the vowel, we're not making any significant changes in how we're producing the sound or in how we're shaping our throats. So essentially, all we really need to do with this is we can shape for the vowel ahead of time if we like, thinking ah, thinking ah, and then allowing the tongue just to come down to that proper ah position. And what often happens with singers, though, who tend to push and strain and force their ways up the scale, is they tend to use more air pressure and more pressure up here when they're trying to make that vowel sound than when they're producing these lip and tongue tip trills, right? Because they are a thinner edge function kind of exercise or sound. And so with this exercise, initially, don't worry about the fullness again. Don't worry about it being a professionally viable sound, right? Focus instead on getting that release inside the throat. Begin first with a nice inhale, a nice inspired kind of posture in the throat, a little bit of a lift here, just a nice open inhale posture, and set up your vocal tract, recalibrate your vocal tract every single time you take a breath. And then don't change things significantly. We do reshape our vocal tract somewhat for the different sounds that we're making, but we don't want to take anything to extremes. So feel that, how that feels in there, right? I'm not changing anything significantly. It still feels the same, just the tongue is no longer fluttering. And we can practice doing that. Don't force the sound. If you hear blah, blah, like this really kind of forced sort of sound, the sound that gets much louder and almost pushed and sometimes goes a little bit sharp in pitch, that means that we're using too much pressure, likely using a little bit too much pressure in here, and that in turn is causing us to use more pressure down here or more force to create higher pressures. So we want to balance that all out. Let the lip or tongue tip trill guide you in helping determine how much pressure you need for the vowel sound. Let it set the sound up for you. Let it set the breath up and let it set up the rest of the vocal tract. So the second exercise that we're going to do also involves semi-occluded sound, but this time we're going to sing a V sound. So the teeth are going to be sitting on that lower lip there, and it's not going to move for the first, oh, it tickles. All right, it's not going to move for the first part of the exercise. And we're also going to sing a descending pattern. Descending patterns, I think I mentioned this in a previous video, are really ideal for singers who tend to strain and who tend to think about ascending pitch patterns and higher notes in an unproductive manner or an unhealthy manner. So we do these descending patterns, oftentimes starting above that break, so that we're not dragging up excess vocal weight, as is the habit oftentimes for us. All right, so here we're going to sing It's going to feel like there's a lot of pressure in that slide because you can feel that back pressure. It's not a bad back pressure, it's a positive back pressure. And you're probably going to be aware of that. I know I am when I sing that. Especially as we get higher in pitch, I really feel that sense of increasing pressure. But don't worry about that. That's going to, again, cue your body to the amount of effort that it actually needs to be able to make that sound in head voice. And what you'll probably also notice as you move higher in pitch is that it becomes increasingly difficult to keep those teeth up against that lip. The tendency for us is to want to open more as we move higher in pitch. We're going to want to open to a vowel sound. That semi-occlusion creates that feeling of pressure, which a lot of us don't really like. But again, this is a positive back pressure that's actually going to help us open up our throats and stabilize the vocal tract and help everything to operate far more efficiently and far more healthily. And the third exercise today involves who and ah sounds, also placing more emphasis on a descending scale pattern. And here again, we're going to place the top note just slightly above our break so that we can access that thinner edge function of the vocal folds. And the great thing about this exercise is that we're starting with, first of all, an H. And for singers who tend to slam their vocal folds together at the onset, this can really help prevent that from happening so that they're, again, not dragging up excess vocal weight when they jump that fifth, that interval of a fifth that we're going to get to in a moment. And also, we're using the vowel oo to start out with. Like E in the other exercise, oo has a very low first formant value. That is the resonance frequency of the vocal tract. And that helps us because that oo and the E even more so want to turn over into head voice earlier than the other vowels do. And so you take advantage of that. Oo and E are excellent training vowels for head voice, so take advantage of their low first formant values. We're going to start down on the tonic or the root, and we're going to leap up an interval of a fifth. We're going to start with who, and then as we leap the interval, we're going to switch to ah, and we're going to sing ah in a descending 5-note scale pattern, right? So I hope that these exercises are really helpful. Please let me know how you do with them. Leave your comments or questions in the comment section below, and I'll do my very, very best to help guide you into developing this part of your range. And again, at first, don't expect the sounds to be full and rich and beautiful and professionally viable. It takes some time to develop this part of the range because it's largely unused. We don't tend to use it in speech. So we have to spend extra time developing that part of our ranges. And be patient with yourself. Understand that, again, this is a process that you're going through in training your voice. And it takes work, and it takes a lot of determination to get it right. I should also note that when you're singing in head voice or M2, you don't necessarily have to have a purely classical vocal tract setup to be able to comfortably and safely and effectively access these higher notes. We do not have to sound like opera singers to be able to sing in head voice. Alright, thank you so much for joining me today. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to this channel so that you'll be notified every time I post new videos. Take care and happy singing in head voice.